as everyone comes back, just if you don't mind staying on mute, we'll, I guess facilitators remember to type the questions into the chat.
So I was a facilitator in my group, which was interesting. And I had a lot of fun.
I deferred.
The sun on my face kind of gave it away. And the sad reality was nobody in our group had spent any time outside. Who had a similar experience on their groups? We got 1, 2. Wow. Okay. So 2 of us are like half or third of the team, half the people or a third of the people on this call didn't step outside once today. It's not a critique, it's just an observation.
I was outside for 3 hours yesterday.
There you go. But I often say we spend 90% of our time indoors, and I use that as a kind of statement to highlight the importance and impact architecture has on us humans. So I think it was more accidental. I didn't really intend for that to happen, but it was great that, hey, there's some data here. Most of us, or at least a third of us, didn't step outside once today. But anyway, so the next step is we need to have the facilitators write their question that their group came up with in chat. And then what's going to happen is Andrew and I are going to start to answer them, and or attempt to answer them, I should say. And then we'll work through however many we get, and then we'll work to about 5, so we got about 10 minutes. But then after this, we'll publish a Q&A paper we will put a little bit more thought into our responses and share it as a resource to the group. That sound good?
And Matt, I do think Pam set this up to go a little beyond 5. So if anyone does want to stick around, I'll certainly stay on and we can continue conversing. So
So I'll go first because I think it was actually Marie who had the really great question, and I'm going to say her question simply because it directly correlated to a discussion the community and the environment had about affecting change within organizations. So the question was, Marie she's working towards her licensure, and she said it seems a lot of this programming is geared towards principals or directors within larger firms, and she was wondering what resources or what can she do in her position in her firm, in the firm that she works for, to affect change. And I'm going to say I don't really have a great answer for you, and I think part of the reason why I wanted to bring it up is because it was a discussion point we had. Megan, if you remember, we had this conversation, right? And so it's something that the community and the environment is actively working towards, and so we're going to continue to try to encourage as much participation across all levels and create opportunities for intersection, so that both senior level principals and directors can see, oh, we have folks in our staff, in our firm, that are really, really passionate about this. Because one of the things you heard in one of the videos is having a champion, right? And having that champion in your team is really critical. So I think to partly answer that question, Marie, we're hoping to provide the space to have those intersections and to create those opportunities to have that two-way dialogue, right? So the senior, very seasoned practitioners with the really eager younger folks that have lots of passion and ideas around how do we move the needle quickly.
And I would just add, just I guess 2 things. One, I do see quite a few firm principals on here, and I thank you for attending. And I hope you'll take this back to your staffs to start looking into. But I guess to add my thoughts on the question overall, I think it's important to remember, no matter what is going on a project, there's still always an opportunity to speak up and share your opinion. And hopefully everyone works in places where that's accepted. But I know for me personally, I've worked on quite a few projects where even if an energy efficiency measure didn't get fully implemented. It was at least brought up and given the space to be fleshed out. And so I think that'd be sort of my take on the question initially. And I do think there's a lot more to unpack there that we can look
Mhm.
into, but is really just to speak up and be interested in, especially if you have a passion about it.
Thank
Um,
you both for answering that.
so I guess I'll share the next question. The first one that was in the chat happened to be the group I was in. Um, it was two. I guess, what are some local examples of successful IDP case studies? And I'm just going to ask them both quick because I think they're related. What are some of the red flags and lessons learned out of those case studies? And sorry, that was part of the first question. The second is, what is the impact of the early engagement by consultants on overall project fees?
Um,
I think that's a big question that
yeah. Um, the local examples of integrative design, um, we can, at Catalyst Partners, we've been in this space for quite a while. And we like to say that integrative design, this is pretty crude, so maybe I'll soften it up. We're all adults here. Integrative design modeling, integrative design process is like teenage sex. A lot of teenagers say they have lots of experience with it, but very few actually do, and those that do aren't very good at it. So that's kind of what we share in kind of the idea that this is really emerging in our region, because there's lots of downward pressure on teams to kind of that one of the questions about cost, right? A lot of folks don't set up the teams from the beginning to be truly integrative because they're competing, and we all know that dynamic, right? And but I would say that there are successful projects. This isn't really local, and I guess part of the follow-up for me is to maybe think a little bit more critically about this. But now I was recently part of two projects on South Dakota State University's campus with two different project teams, two different engineers, two different architects. One really embraced the integrative design process, and I was the kind of facilitator of both. And so maybe one's my failure and the other's my success. But one really invested in the trust, time, and energy necessary to do the integrative design process well. The other team kind of put it on the back burner and didn't really give it the time or attention it needed in the space and design process as it was most important and most critical. I actually gave a presentation on this a couple years ago, the tale of two projects. It was a case study of integrative design process. But the one that really invested in the integrative design process exceeded just about every goal it had set for itself within budget and on time. They actually added scope towards the end. They were able to add solar panels. The other project was over budget and kind of behind schedule. And it was really difficult to move the needle on some of the things that we were trying to accomplish because there wasn't great clarity across the whole team on what the goals were, right? And so I think that is a really poignant case study in the integrated design process because it just really spoke clearly to me and the importance of really early engagement, clear understanding from the beginning, goal setting, buy-in of the whole team, trust, empathy with each member of the design team. But yeah, I think developing a case study or a list of case studies locally that we can kind of point to. Doug Farr, who's a very inspirational kind of thought leader in this space, likes to point out, right? Communities can only change so far as there are built examples of where to go, right? And he calls them, oh shoot, what's he call them? I don't want to say the Patriot sites, but that's not it. The word's escaping me. But basically sites that people go visit to understand and learn from. And we need those in every basically neighborhood to really point and clearly define the sort of projects that we need to kind of work on into the future. So maybe that's part of our programming too, is developing a set of tours or case studies that we can share about really good examples of innovative design.
I think the only piece I would add is because the question has come up for me when I've asked about it in different firms was, is this an IDP project? Well, no, the contract's not written that way. It's like, well, there's a difference between contracts and process. As we all know, the architectural design process ideally tends to be fairly iterative, hopefully, and that gets us to a good solution. And I think that's relevant to thinking about the other disciplines, even if the contract doesn't always support it. It never hurts to even simply ask your mechanical engineer as you're laying out the building in SD, hey, how much space do you really need for a mechanical room? Because far too often I've seen it where we give an arbitrary number and just sort of fit a mechanical room in. But I've been in a lot of mechanical rooms that are way too small and very cramped, purely because, again, on the estimating side, we look at cost per square foot at that stage. And it's like, I think my charge to everyone would be to look for the little opportunities to integrative thinking into your process, with the hope to be taking steps and hopefully eventually leaps forward to get there. I do want to.
Can we had a group and we were wanting about the design tools, the energy analysis tools. So I was hoping to at least present that.
Yeah, give me 1 second, Dave. I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. It is 5, so I understand if anyone needs to hop off. Like I said, I'm happy to stay on and continue answering questions and dialoguing. I do want to do a couple quick plugs. Again, always thank you to our sponsors, both chapter and committee level. We have a COTE committee meeting coming up on February 11th. That will be through Zoom as well. I think the registration is on the website and will be in the weekly emails. So just keep an eye out for that. All are welcome. That's really where we look and plan future programming and other events. And then the other big plug is our next event. If you haven't heard or looked at the Framework for Design Excellence, we will be hosting an introduction to that on February 18th, the same time frame. So again, thank you all for being here. Like I said, we'll jump to the next question. I'll give anyone that needs to go a couple seconds to hop out. And then I guess I'll jump to the energy modeling tool question. I've dabbled with a number of them. I think, Matt, you may be able to speak to it more. They range in cost and complexity. And I think the hurdle for me was always timelines of projects, prevented me from necessarily diving in. But I am finding simpler methods as we go on. I haven't purchased the Passive House design tool that they have out there, but I did find some stuff from school that actually is derivative of Passive House that I'm starting to look at. So I think it ranges in complexity and cost. I guess one specific, it's not energy modeling, but it was daylight software. I've used both Autodesk Insight through Revit and Light Stanza and found those very user-friendly and useful to just understand the daylight impacts of a building. And like they said in the video, that's one of those first passive strategies that you can start with and start to apply that system thinking of, if we add more daylight, well, we can add aux sensors and hopefully totally reduce the lighting load. And you already and then that ties into the heating and cooling system, hopefully. And I think that's really the takeaway and ties back to the last question of connecting the dots between things. I often like the example from Bill Reed and the Seven Group and their manual on IDP, particularly about how does paint color and HVAC system design connect. And it was all about light reflectivity and light colors. But I've digressed a little too far from the question. Matt, what about you? What energy modeling softwares have you had experience with?
Well, I think our team has dabbled in just about all of the softwares that we're aware of, free and otherwise. There's so many out there, and it can be really overwhelming, especially for teams that haven't really done sort of analytical software, any sort of usage in that space before. But I personally really like Sapphira as a kind of feedback mechanism for designers, because it plugs in with SketchUp, and it can really quickly provide not accurate cost data, like this is going to save you $100,000 a year in energy costs, but it can give you a percent, this has an impact on your design and to this kind of level, or you can expect to have this kind of impact on energy. And so you can almost in real time, like reduce your window to wall ratio. You can increase your kind of envelope thermal performance. You can add projection shading devices, and you can see kind of how that all works. But I mean, I'm gonna be very selfish maybe right now and just say that one of the things that we as a service-based organization to AE teams like to say is, because we work in this space all the time, we're pretty well versed in all the tools, and we do use Lightstand as Andrew mentioned too, but we also understand how best to model very simple things in the early design process, right? Because that's almost an art in of itself, right? You can get really quickly in the weeds, really, and go down rabbit holes that don't provide a whole lot of value if you're not careful. So what we like to say is, we like to come in as service providers and provide that service to teams, and give you the feedback almost in real time, to equip you to do what you do best, right? And so it's really like that synergistic dynamic that they mentioned in one of the videos about, optimizing the design process, right? But all that said, like, we recognize not everybody and not every project's appropriate for our involvement. But one of the things we could do is do some training on tools if there's significant interest cross membership, say in Sapphira, or I know Progressive use the COTE Plus tool, right? So like there are lots of different analytical softwares out there on the marketplace that we can also provide training on and kind of help membership understand.
And I think a tool I would add that's not so much energy analysis and modeling, but benchmarking. I'll give a plug for the Zero tool. So that will help you establish a benchmark EUI to track for. You put in site location, square footage of the building, use type, and it'll give you a spit out of both EUI to meet current energy code, the current level of the 2030 commitment, which is an 80% reduction of the CBEX baseline, or go full zero energy. So it's related to the question, just in that to me is where you would start if you're looking to benchmark. And I would say, in thinking of our conversation already, it's, that's another place to just start and dabble. How cool would it be if at every kickoff meeting, preferably the architect, but someone said, here's the energy budget for this project. I think that will make a huge headway, both with owners and contractors in particular, like, oh, what's going on?
Yeah, I think the energy budget kind of conversation in the video was really intriguing. And the zero tool is a really quick way for you all to take those three critical pieces of information, like where geographically in which climate zone does the project exist, what's its primary use, and how big is it, right? And that will quickly articulate targets for the energy use intensity that you can then say in project meetings, and maybe it's just it's the vehicle to have the conversation with the engineer or the design team about how do we get there, right? And I'd also like to highlight too, like when we're doing design and now are evaluating design decisions, there was that graph in one of the videos too that basically said start here, and that's with passive things, and you apply active things, which are like lighting and mechanical systems, and then lastly you think about kind of offsetting or renewables, right? And the folks in this room are mostly interested in those passive systems. And so, I just like to encourage you all to start to think about. There's another thing that Ed Maria put together is the 2030 palettes, which are, again, sensitive to your region, your use type, and your size of project. There's palettes, you can go click on it. It will kind of give you like best rules of best practices and rules of thumb, like regarding, depth of windows or height, how tall the windows need to be to get deep into the footprint of the building. So again, those aren't analytical; those are best practices and rules of thumb. But that's a really great resource to kind of look at to help think about the impact of these passive systems that we all kind of interact with on a day-to-day basis.
So, Michelle, please tell Bob we asked his question.
I will.
Ways to sell to clients. Are there specific data points to share or questions to ask at the front end based on project typologies? I think it's a good springboard from the energy budget question. I think that's always to me, that feels like a great question. Hey, Mr. or Mrs. Owner, do you have an energy budget? My guess is 8 times out of 10, they're going to say, no, what's that? So that gives you all an opportunity to teach, and I don't think validate's the right verb, but it's what's on my mind right now. Validate why they hired you. You get to demonstrate your expertise. I think beyond that, I think typologies, we could quickly get down a rabbit hole, but I think we all, in whatever markets we play in, understand enough of what's going on that, in a school or healthcare environment, particularly healthcare, I'm probably going to be a lot more in tune with indoor air quality issues and biophilic design issues. Whereas in an industrial facility, probably not concerned with much of those. It might purely be reducing operational cost through reducing energy use and energy quantity. So I think part of it is really understanding what you're doing and knowing to ask pointed questions about those particular areas of concern as it comes to a typology. And really challenging an owner to think in more detail, hopefully beyond simply using an industrial building as an example. I have to get this building operational by this date to produce the product, to hit it to market, to start generating income. It's like, that is all important and we're all on board. Can we look at the next 15 years and reduce your overall energy cost and increase your profit? I think it's also incumbent to gauge your clients and try to approach the conversation sometimes in the right way of, I don't always want to lead with the highest and best sustainability measures. Sometimes I want to target it to an owner's bottom line. Hey, you're going to spend a little more upfront, but here's the return on that investment. So that's kind of my take.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I like to use the owner's values to sell these things. I like to say, and say I'm working with company X, I'll do some online stalking and try to get at corporate values that they've kind of shared or expressed. And then through the integrative design process, you know, in a kind of value alignment effort, I'll kind of say, here are your values, here's your stated values, Mr. Client. Here's how those values intersect the built environment. Here's the lessons and here's the impact we can make with decisions we're making right now in your facility on these values. Most of us in the room, we think in kind of really deep, critical ways about the spaces that we're in. But the reality is most folks aren't that sophisticated, and I don't mean this crudely, but they're not that sophisticated in their understanding of how spaces affect them in their business and how spaces align with values. I think a great case study is an industrial facility that we were a part of last year. You know, the program was really, we just need space to house equipment and people to build stuff. But we had a value kind of exercise where we said, okay, Mr. Client, like, what are your goals? What are your values? What are your key objectives about this? Besides just housing stuff and people. And it kind of led to a discussion about quality of their product, right? Because that was a key driver, that was a key value, right, for their organization. We deliver quality product. So we kind of went down that rabbit hole and like, okay, how does the architecture of this ugly metal building affect quality? Well, we know happier people make fewer mistakes. We know that the better we can see our product, the fewer mistakes we'll make. We know the stress of our individuals, our folks in the space, and the quality of the air affect all these things. So we started to kind of create a connection to that value of the value of delivering a quality product to the decisions we make in the design process. And so we really ended up with a great framework to help them understand how to make decisions in the design space that affect their corporate values. And I think you all are in a tremendous position to be able to articulate that better than almost anybody else. You all understand spaces and how they affect and how they manifest values and how they speak to us, right? And so I just think that's a just tremendous way to sell, because you're not really selling it. You're just connecting the work to the values. The clients are selling it themselves, right? These are their values. You're just articulating how it manifests itself in architecture and design decisions. We've just found tremendous value in that. So, or success in that. The more you can align these sorts of things to values that the client really resonates with, the more success we've had in keeping them in the projects. Because if there isn't value, then when they see the price tag, they're like, well, it's not worth it. But if they understand and deeply are behind the value that the decision is a manifestation of, then they are more able to have that discussion about cost. Because cost without having the value counterpart isn't, you know, it's not valuable, right? It's not leading to meaningful and informed and appropriate decisions. It's just kind of knee-jerk reaction to projects being over budget. So it's quarter after 5. We're now 15 minutes over. And we had a polite moment where you could all exit gracefully around 5. And I think we want to have another moment and saying, we all have lives, we all have things to do this evening. We certainly love this sort of conversation. And Andrew mentioned that we have lots of events planned for this coming year. Our goal is every month to have a similar kind of event where we share information and then we have a dialogue. We're going to pivot next time to the AIA framework for design excellence. And because we really feel that framework is the vehicle to achieve the 2030 commitment. And it's also, the truth is, the 2030 commitment is really about energy and carbon, and that's really important. But the framework really kind of expands the dialogue about a different set of challenges as well. So I think those two things in tension are really the important work of our profession. I like to say all the time, like, health and human wellness is often at tension with energy efficiency, right? The most energy efficient building is a concrete bunker, right? But nobody wants to be in that space. And it probably wouldn't be very healthy for us if we did spend a whole lot of time there. So really, we're trying to use that framework to have a further conversation about putting that 2030 discussion in context. So again, thank you for your time. We're certainly willing to stick around, but we also recognize we're all busy folks. So yeah, I guess if there's any last kind of thoughts or comments, we can keep talking, else we can call it an evening.
Matt, I need to sign off. This is Tom. Thank you, Matt and Andrew. Well done.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for attending.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. I think we're leaving en masse now. Thanks everyone that's still around. Hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.